Thank you, everyone, so much for being here for this abortion storytelling panel. And I just want to give Asha a big round of congratulations. The world premiere of her film. You were the first audience to see it. Very exciting. My name is Leela Meadow-Connor. I am a programmer at this year's Athena Film Festival. And I just want to give a shout out to Athena for really putting such a spotlight on abortion and abortion storytelling. This doesn't happen at all film festivals, so this is really, really special. So as I mentioned, I'm Leela Meadow-Connor. I'm the programmer here. I'm a producer, and I'm also the founder of a film series called Repro Film that connects storytellers and advocates who celebrate bodily autonomy. And that's how I've had the pleasure to be connected to all of these wonderful women here. I'm just going to give a brief introduction of each of the panelists. And Asha, we're going to start with you to talk about your film just a little bit. So Asha Daya is a filmmaker and an activist. Of course, you just saw the world premiere of her film. She is the board chair for the national nonprofit organization Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice and hosts a filmmaker podcast series for Repro Film, our film series. Slow down. Okay, yes. Next, we have Renee Bracey Sherman, an abortion activist, writer, and founder, and co-executive director of We Testify, an organization dedicated to the leadership and representation of people who have abortions. And of course, you saw her in the film as well. She was an executive producer on Hours to Tell, an award-winning documentary on abortion storytellers. She is also the co-author of the forthcoming book, Liberating Abortion, Our Legacy, Stories, and Vision for How We Save Us, HarperCollins 2024.
And my co-author is here too.
Oh, wonderful. Regina. Yay. Congratulations. And then we have Ruth Lightman at the very end there. Well, okay, yes. My paper isn't in order, so sorry. Okay, Jess Jacobs, right here. The amazing Jess Jacobs is a filmmaker and activist whose work primarily centers diverse representation of the femme experience in film. Her film Plan C, which many of you probably screened as part of last year's Athena Film Festival. And she is just an incredible force within the world of film and abortion activism. And Ruth Lightman. Through her company Ruthless Films, Ruth has directed 6 feature documentaries. Her films focus on women and those whose lives have faced a lack of opportunity, but who are survivors. Her most recent film, No One Asked You, will screen right after this panel, so we hope you'll stick around for it. It's a really wonderful film. So as you all know, it's literally never been more imperative to embrace storytelling as a catalyst for cultural change, and specifically around this topic of reproductive justice. And I'm really excited and honored to be in conversation with all of you who do such amazing work to dig into this, to talk about how we dismantle the stigma around abortion, promote acceptance of abortion storytelling, and you all do it through such distinctive mediums and your own narratives. And thank you for the work that you do. So Asha, I want to start with you, since we just saw your film. Firstly, why did you feel compelled to tell this story, and specifically about later abortion, which is not something we see a lot? And also, before you start, maybe you just want to tell us how you came to be an activist in this realm.
First of all, thank you everyone for being here today. This is such a huge honor for me, and thank you, Melissa, and the whole Athena team for inviting me to screen this film. I will say I'm not an activist. I am a filmmaker and storyteller, and I think, so my background, speaking about destigmatizing, I come from a religious, conservative, anti-choice background. I do not identify with that anymore. I grew up in Australia where religion wasn't very political. When I moved here in 2008, another pivotal election year, I very quickly learned what it meant to identify under the evangelical Christian label, be in a church in America, even though it was in Los Angeles, and just adopted these labels like pro-life, and would hear people on, the pulpit talking about abortion in such triggering and not great ways. And so I just, without even thinking or researching, those were the things that I thought I had to think about abortion. I didn't really have a set opinion. And it wasn't until 4 or 5 years later, after I left the church, I went through a divorce at 29, because the thing to do is get married very young and early in that tradition. So I went through a divorce, left the church, and I was working in TV at the time. I've been in media for a long time. I won't say how long because it will make me feel old. But I started building a whole new circle of friends, hearing different perspectives, people sharing their stories. And it just gave me a whole new view on what it meant, what feminism was, what gender equality was, what it meant to live in the world and be discriminated, all these things that I never heard in the church at all. So it was really enlightening for me. In addition to that, I learned of the numerous women and people that I knew from my former church who would openly claim to be anti-abortion, secretly get abortions, multiple abortions, some of them. But for some reason, they felt comfortable sharing it with me. And some of these people have shared their story publicly. Obviously, I'm not, sharing details, but it just made me realize, hang on a second, there's some disconnect here between it's almost like a performative act, standing in a church on stage, saying these beliefs, but then behind the scenes, there are so many complex factors that go into our lives. And the way that one of my friends, who's shared in multiple blog posts and shared publicly, she talks about the idea of, well, I just wanted to have an abortion, pray to God to forgive me, I would deal with the problem, and I would go on with my life. And in that moment, I realized it was more about covering up the shame of having sex outside of marriage, which is a big, big deal. And I realized it wasn't so much about abortion as much as it was the idea of having control over your body, over your sexuality, over your pleasure, and not feeling that fear of being judged. And so that led me on a tangent of researching, listening to stories, finding organizations like We Testify, and understanding the data. But honestly, it was personal storytelling that really shifted my perspective and changed my mind. And so fast forward a few years later, I've got 2 kids, and going through pregnancy, I was very fortunate to have 2 very smooth experiences, but just hearing from the doctors say that a million things have to go right at every second of every hour of every day of every week of every month of that pregnancy, and for one of those million things to go wrong, all of a sudden, I could have been in a situation where now I have to make a decision that may be tough. And so to hear stories of, especially people who are going through, had to make a decision about abortion later in their pregnancy, for me, it was a realization that even though I considered myself pro-life at this point, pro-choice, sorry, that was not a Freudian slip at all, I swear. Even though I considered myself pro-choice, I hadn't really thought deeply about what it meant to have an abortion later in pregnancy. And so I was initially hired as a producer on this film. Things changed along the way, and the initial production company said, we don't have the bandwidth or funds to continue making it. Do you want the footage? Do you want to make it? I said, yes, please. And this was 2020. And another pivotal election was coming up. And I thought, this is something that really important that needs to be shared. Due to the funds and pandemic and bandwidth and parenting, it took me 4 years to finish the film. But I feel like now it's more relevant than ever because of what happened in 2022 and what's been happening in the state ballot measure, what's happening last week. And so I feel like now is the time to share these stories. And, my intent really is to share with predominantly pro-choice audiences. We need to start speaking up about later abortion and not being so benevolent, using the word abortion and not being afraid of pushing back on the misinformation that Renee talks about in the film. And so that's really my intent, and that's my goal with this film, and what compelled me to, make it. And along the way, I've had to investigate and interrogate my own internal stigma and really come to a place of everyone deserves the right to make their decisions about their own bodies and lives. It's not my place to tell you or anyone. So in a roundabout nutshell way, the TLDR reason is that I wanted to make an impact. So.
Thank you, Asha. I think you are. I want to throw this down to Jess and Ruth. Why is storytelling, and particularly in television and film on screen, so important, to our cultural and societal change? Like, I think literally just hearing people say the word abortion out loud, we've talked about that a lot. And maybe Ruth, you can speak to it from a documentary standpoint. And Jess, I know that you've done both doc and narrative, and I'd love to hear from you about the narrative side of things too.
First of all, thanks for having me on this amazing panel, and thanks to Athena and to you, Leela, for bringing so many important people together to talk about this. I think abortion storytelling is it's critical for all of us. So I feel like I should start out by saying I've been pregnant 4 times, and I have 1 child. And I've had 2 abortions, and I had a stillborn child. And your film really, really hit me in a major way. And I think that, I think that it's incredible that people like Jess have made several films about abortion. And I think that abortion storytelling in film is really critical. All of them are important. And I think that one of the things that makes it so special to have this panel and Athena and the combination and your scripts, that your script program, is that all of these stories are really important, right? And in the film festival world, there's 1 film at a festival, each festival, right? There's 1. Oh, we have our abortion story. We got that. And that is so damaging to all of our stories. And so I think it's really important to tell as many stories, because we all have them. If we didn't have an abortion ourselves, we have people close to us in our lives that have had them. And I think that the language is really important. And so, in the particular case of my film, which is showing later on today, No One Asked You, it's very unapologetically pro-abortion, because I had a personal arc in that, I was pro-choice, and I'm not pro-choice. I am pro-abortion, and that's how I phrase it. And I think that I just think that it's really important for us to talk about it, and for men to talk about it too. And so bringing men into the conversation is really critical. And I think that, gatherings like this, we're doing that. So.
Thank you so much to Athena for this conversation, for being a partner on the Abortion Pipeline Project. I'm just obsessed with this festival. It's like an amazing thing, because it's so true. I think all of the things that have been said, like the one tokenistic abortion film that that the festival might let in, if it kind of can, if it's not too controversial about the subject, the role of media. There's a statistic that Americans consume 12 hours of media a day. Like, that's like the average. That's crazy. Music, journalism, film, TV, podcasts, like 12 hours a day, which means that like the stories that we tell in film and television, in journalism, they are creating our reality. If abortion is not a part of those stories, we don't understand the degree to which abortion is a part of every single person in this room's reality. Abortion touches every single one of our lives in numerous ways. I think post-Dobbs, we're seeing that in very traumatic ways. It's always sort of devastating to know that like the trauma is the thing that requires people to pay attention. Like, we've been talking about this for literally years. Renee is like what do we call you? The Beyonce,
The
of abortion
Beyonce of
storytelling.
abortion
Like
storytelling.
Renee's really been doing this for a long time. But like when I had my abortion at 19, I was like, still, I'm like, how did I even know about abortion? Like, how did I even know that was an option? Like, I can't remember. But I had finally told my mom after dealing with so much stigma, and she shared that she had also had an abortion also as a teenager. And I had never known. I was so alone. I was so ashamed. And that's where sort of all of this started. And as an actress, I started as an actress and as a teenager. And like, as an actress, I was like, okay, sorry, I'm talking so fast. I always do this. As an actress, I understood the opportunity to bring these two things together. The documentary side, in terms of telling the stories of heroes that are doing this work, and I'm not talking about superheroes, I'm talking about everyday human beings who are the heroes of this movement, bringing their stories to the forefront. In the narrative space, I think there are a couple of different ways to think about this. One is that we can tell the stories of the joys that we're not seeing in our day-to-day life. We can imagine a different future. I think it's the role of storytellers to use our imagination to build the world that we want to see. And so stories, a film that I made in which like the choice whether or not to have an abortion, that's not the point. The point is, how do we build community around our choices? Right? Like, this is not a controversial subject in this film. It's just a fact. She just has an abortion. It's all fine. And then we're building our community around that. So what kind of world do we want to see? I think we can build those like, sort of future, these like beautiful visions of the future in narrative film. I also think it is, to Ruth's point, like the diversity of experiences of abortion. You can capture that and tell those stories in a way that is bringing kind of like these different conversations together. And then finally, as criminalization is more of a concern in this country, we can tell stories that don't put people's lives at risk, which again, the goal is that that's never the circumstance. But as we are dealing with these stories, for people that don't, in Plan C, we did a lot of like face covering. We changed voices, a lot of VFX to make sure that folks' identities weren't able to be kind of unscrambled and discovered. And narrative film is a way to sort of take the identity out of it and say, like, these are stories that are real, that are based on true stories that are happening, but which don't put real people's lives at risk. So I think there's like all of these different ways. See, thank you so much. I need this. I could go all day. Anyway, so that's I think where the narrative film piece kind of plays in with documentary too.
Thanks, Jess. And now to the Beyonce. Can you talk about the importance of accuracy in abortion storytelling in media? And are we getting it right? Or is the mainstream media getting it right? Are these independent filmmakers the ones who are getting it right? Can you talk a little bit more about the problems that we're facing?
Well, I think one of the things to remember about with this film is that all of the storytellers that you heard from shared their stories. They were interviewed before Roe fell. One of the questions that I get a lot is, well, what's going to happen when Roe falls? Oh my gosh, how big has the change been since Roe fell? And I'm like, not much. And not to ignore like the really deep, devastating impact of abortion becoming an actual crime in like 14 states. And parts of different times of pregnancy during your gestation becoming a crime in a number of states. That is really critical and that's important, and those clinics shutting down. But this idea that, oh my gosh, people are going to have to travel for their abortions now, that's old news. And anyone telling you that that's something new is lying. They have not been paying attention. And I think one of the things that's really critical about media getting it right. And I'm using the broader term media of like literally everything you see on TV, whether it's news, TV shows that you enjoy, or even just, a TikTok account that's sharing something. All of us consuming those 12 hours, and yes, I binge watch a lot of TV, so mine's actually, my number's
She's like,
higher
it's true.
than that. My number's way higher than that. We're taking in signals and information about how to treat one another and ourselves. We are taking in information about how people who have abortions deserve to be treated in this country and around the world. And what ends up happening is that we then say, it is okay for these laws to go into effect because I'm actually really uncomfortable with abortion. So that's your struggle. And I'm actually not going to get in the middle of it. The other thing is that in the film, I was more, I was less unabashed about it than I am now. But I said that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, caused this problem. And I want to be clear, they did. It is unacceptable that we have pro-choice politicians who do not show up for later abortion. The reason that we have the issues and the barriers that we have today is because Obama didn't sign the Freedom of Choice Act. Because he and Nancy Pelosi allowed for abortion to be taken out of the ACA. We almost lost contraception in the ACA because our current president, as then vice president, was working with the Catholic bishops. The laws in Louisiana were signed by a Democrat, John Bel Edwards, the governor there. So when they say that, we're going to make abortion the center of this election, it has been at the center of every election since. They just didn't talk about it. That is how we got to thousands of restrictions, the barriers that you saw in this film. They considered these women as disposable because they were afraid to talk about abortion. They were afraid to say the word abortion. They were afraid to have a real conversation about what the healthcare system looks like in this country. That is a problem. And yes, go vote, please. Please. I cannot deal with another 4 years of Trump. Cannot see that man's face. But also, what are we doing in the meantime that this does not continue? Because when you have a politician saying to you, well, we're going to restore Roe, this is what they're saying they're going to restore, that this is the status quo that is okay. And that is unacceptable. The question is what are we rebuilding? To tie it back to your question about storytelling, this is what happens when we can wake people up and actually say, this is what your laws do. This is what your barriers do. Every single one of you loves someone who's had an abortion. Think about who you love. You want to go through this. Then think about which politician you're willing to vote for who's going to be able to do that to the person you love. In fact, if you've had an abortion and you feel comfortable, would you raise your hand? Look around. We are not some random people. We are literally the people sitting next to you. This impacts all of us. And so this is why our storytelling matters in person, but also, of those people who've had abortions, how many of you have actually seen a story on television or film that reflects your abortion experience? Right. We have work to do. That's all.
Thank you. That really hits home. Maybe just Jess, I know that you have we've talked a lot about like just sort of the statistics about, narrative mainstream media, and we're seeing on television especially, and maybe mainstream movies. What are they getting wrong?
Oh God. Well, yeah. I mean, really everything.
Or is anybody getting anything right?
I mean, the way that I'll talk about this is to talk about the abortion pipeline project. So the Abortion Pipeline Project is a new initiative that Renee and I and Gretchen Sisson, Dr. Gretchen Sisson, I'm going to give her that doctor. She deserves it. And Melissa and the Athena team, we devised and put together to seed and source more stories about abortion for Hollywood, for the pipeline. And we got 65 scripts through for our first go around, which is pretty inspiring. And I did see two of our winners.
Yeah, we're a winner.
Yeah, give us. And one of the major things in our in the criteria for judging was, do the characters in these films, are they statistically aligned? Are they aligned with the statistical lived realities of who has abortions in the United States? Because the reality of it all is that, like, we're so used to seeing the, like, messy young person who, like, doesn't,
Who's
messy young
white.
white person. Thank you. Messy young white person who, screwed up and is facing, has to face the music or something. And the reality is that the majority of people who have abortions in this country are people of color, Black people, brown people, Indigenous folks. They are parents already. The majority of people who have abortions. Those stories don't get told because they don't have the sensationalist, again, kind of tokenistic thing that Hollywood really likes to do. And so that's the Abortion Pipeline Project is here to change that.
Can I jump in on there real quick? I think there are great documentaries that do this well. This one, of course, is one of them. And it features Sharon and Val, are two of our abortion storytellers. Sharon was in our first cohort, so known her since 2016. And Val's just, like, amazing and so gracious with her story. After Tiller is an amazing documentary that a lot of folks should watch. Obviously, our documentary, Ours to Tell, is great too. But when it comes to narrative, they're getting better. They used to be sort of all the, like, well, they want abortion, actually, then they get hit by a car, and so then they don't have to make the decision, or they want abortion and they had a miscarriage. I'm like literally not kidding. The rate of death related to considering an abortion is kind of wild on television. It's shifting, right? And there are films that I think are fantastic. Nia DaCosta's Little Woods is phenomenal. If I can tell you to watch one film on abortion, it is Little Woods, because it's so beautiful in the way that it situates the abortion decision and lack of access in North Dakota with the larger conversation of lack of health care in that community and the way in which we treat people. There's other, like, really amazing depictions. One of my favorite is the P-Valley depiction. If folks haven't seen the show P-Valley, it's a fabulous show that needs to get all the awards, about a bunch of strippers in a club in Mississippi.
It's on Stars.
It's on Stars. It's so good. But they have an episode where Mercedes and her daughter, they travel like 2 hours to Jackson, Mississippi, to the only clinic. What's really painful about that depiction is that when it aired, it was already an archive of time, because that clinic had already closed because the Dobbs decision had come down. The way in which Katori Hall did that storytelling is so beautiful, because she shows this parent and her daughter making a decision, and Mercedes as a character talking about her own experience becoming pregnant at 15 and choosing to continue her pregnancy, but then also having her parental rights taken away from her because she was poor and because she was young. And the way in which it is a larger conversation, abortion is not made as a decision in a vacuum. And so there are folks who are doing an amazing job. Shonda Rhimes, like, the reason you see people of color on television having an abortion is because of Shonda Rhimes. From Dr. Christina Yang to the two depictions in season 4 and season 5 of Scandal, to a consideration, but then continuing a pregnancy in How to Get Away with Murder, to all of the depictions on Grey's Anatomy. There's like a million. I think they did another one like last week. Shonda, they were like, no. Her and Krista Veroff were like, we're doing an abortion every other episode. They really have changed the conversation and what does it look like to not only show patients, but also providers and sort of that challenge where they have to push back against other providers like on private practice. So I think that's not me dropping more things, I swear. I think that there are so many great things for you to look at that are not only our stories, but I'm so glad that like our stories and narratives are wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that, seeing films like Asha's and they're so powerful. And I think we also see a lot of trauma around abortion. And I want to throw this to Ruth because your film is funny. And there's something about being able to laugh about it that is really, really powerful. Can you talk a little bit about that? And we're all going to see your movie, hopefully, right after this.
Because
But
you're going to need to laugh.
yes, because we need a laugh. Yeah. But talk a little bit about it coming from that angle.
So just briefly, so my film follows Liz Winstead, the co-creator of The Daily Show, and her organization Abortion Access Front through the battleground states of America in the South and the Midwest over the last 7 years. And I think that what happened, so in terms of that, what happened for me is Trump was elected, and I had met Liz years before, and she was hilarious, and I knew that she was hilarious, and I loved her abortion story and her book. And then it was the day after the election, and I saw her on MSNBC, and she was getting ready to do the Vaginal Mystery Tour. And I thought, she's going to be my lifeline because I'm going to need to laugh through this because things are going to get dark. Because we made a film about the people, and some of them are sitting here too, but we made a film about the people who knew that this was going to happen. We didn't know how it was going to happen, but we all knew it was going to happen. And really, this was to activate people. And I just have to say this because I was here 5 years ago because our film was going to be a series, and it had a different name then, and it was a much different story. And we were in this very room, and it was right when all of that legislation started going down. And this is the room full of the smartest women, right? And a lot of people didn't know, right, what was going to happen and what was already happening. And so we felt like it was really important to follow Liz and a bunch of comics, take you to all of the battleground states, take you to Mississippi, and follow the people from the Pink House as a way to rally people, galvanize people, because we have a lot of work to do. And there's so much fatigue in activism that I think what's really essential is bringing joy and levity to the conversation so that we have the energy to keep working. So that's the reason for comedy, and just because we need it.
Yeah, especially right now. One of the things that, that's a problem in the independent film world is making your movies one thing, but getting audiences to see it is another thing. And Jess, I know with Plan C, it's a great film. And again, it's very important. And it also there's light moments to it, and it's hopeful. And what has been your journey with trying to get the movie out there into audiences? And also to that note, how can we as a community who supports these stories help?
Oh, Lord. Okay. Without walking everybody here through the saga of this film, there are multiple stages of the filmmaking process. There is the ideation, there is the funding, there is the making, there is the distribution. And the ideation with this one is, and I think probably with most of these films, there are so many stories to tell. And then you get to funding, and good luck. Abortion funding in this country has been such a mess. I guess I'll just say that. There was a big outpouring after Dobbs. If that money had been there before Dobbs and that organizing had happened before Dobbs, we would never be here. the $44 million that it took Ohio to get that ballot measure done? $44 million. Invest that in community.
But also the abortion fund had to close for a month and a half.
Yep.
Even after they won that, because they still
Because
couldn't
they didn't
fund
have
abortions.
funding. I mean, you guys, it's so dire. So, okay, so we're and then we're trying to tell these stories. Then bless Sundance for saying yes to us. But I also have taken a bunch of movies there where they've said no. And we love Sundance and we have feedback. And then it came time for the offers. This is a Sundance film. This is a South by Southwest documentary, seasoned documentary filmmaker. You guys, crickets. Literal crickets.
Broken system.
A
big
broken
time.
system. We got feedback verbatim. We love this film. We're going to tell everybody in our community to watch it, but we can't platform it. In 2023, y'all. And people wonder why we are where we are. And so we ended up taking a measly offer from Stars. So they have P-Valley, they have Plan C. Go get a Stars subscription, you guys. And they gave us, I'll just say it. They gave us $90,000. This is an $800,000 documentary that we're still in debt on, by the way. And we said, please carve out, you guys can have streaming. We want everything else because we know that you're not going to do anything with this goddamn film. Sorry for whatever. I'm mad about it. And yeah, always slow it down, girlfriend. So we're doing, I'm looking at Jess Mills in the audience who worked on No One Asked You and who also has been an amazing digital strategist for us at Plan C. Look, we said we have to do it our own way. We know that 80% of Americans believe that abortion is a choice that should be available to them. This was 45% of voting Republicans. That was like a recent poll. I was like, you guys, this is not controversial. This is about getting the choir to sing louder. And so we are doing all sorts of outreach, digital outreach. We are doing, we've launched the Watch Party Packs, which are available at plancmovie.com. And then you come up against digital suppression, which is a whole other conversation. But we had MailChimp tell us that there was an email that we weren't allowed to send out to our listserv. I'm not kidding, y'all. It's Meta, yeah. It's Google, yeah. It's MailChimp. Like this, it's so deep. It's so deep. So, and again, there is hope. Like, I don't want to leave this, but I think it's like all of the people in this room, like we are the ones that have to be asking for the content. We have to show up to the movie theater when these movies are in the theaters. We have to show up and stream these things. We have to, that's how we tell Hollywood and media makers that these are the kinds of stories that we want to see. And then we have to make sure that we're doing it right and that there's a diversity of stories and all of that. And that part we're working on. So. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something to that it is a crying shame that in the year that we've experienced around abortion pills, that Plan C didn't have, offers being thrown at them. And that's just indicative of if it didn't happen this year, it shows how broken the system is. And I'm a little bit older than Jess, so I'm definitely in the giving zero fuck stage of my life. And so I don't have a problem saying to a distributor or a broadcaster or anything, I'll probably get in a lot of trouble for this. If they say to me, oh, we're not doing anything political this year, I will go back to them in that moment, and I will say, don't be that person. Don't be on that side. Don't be the person that calls it political, because you're saying that our healthcare is political, and that's really bad for you, because everyone wants to see these stories. And so I think that, at least for us, our plan, because our, is sort of this unapologetic pushing it out there, hoping that audiences for our films can tell distributors and broadcasters and streamers that they really do want this, because they're, all of our futures and lives are at stake because of it. So I think that they'll turn around, and we have to hire more women in those positions, gatekeepers, and we need a little turnover.
Hire people who've had abortions.
That's right. Asha, can you talk a little bit about the funding for your movie and like was it a struggle for you? I mean, I think you've been working on this film, as you said, for a long time.
Yes. It took me 4 years to make. I just want to say I want to get into the giving zero fucks stage of life because that just seems so great. Leaning into that. It took me and this was my first solo film that I made by myself. So I learned a lot along the way. I had some great mentors and filmmaker friends around me who I'm so thankful for. It was applying to 1,000,001 grants, getting a handful of smaller grants, which I am so thankful for. I mentioned them in the credits. You know, these are people who are supporting up and coming independent filmmakers and who are not scared of putting their brand or their label or their organization behind a film about not just abortion, not a pro-choice film, a film about later abortion, really going there. And so that meant a lot to me. I put some of my own money into it. I did a Kickstarter. Throughout that whole process, it was building community. And, you know, it was a struggle and it was a hustle. And I would work on it in little bits and then put it down and work on it and go back and forth over the past 4 years. But along the way, I think the thing that really helped me going was learning about how other films are made and the other process of other filmmakers and how a film comes out when it's meant to come out. And, you know, it's like it becomes its own thing and the culture and the community rallies around it. But also along the way, hearing personal stories, I would tell friends, oh, I'm working on this film and it's about later abortion. And here are the storytellers, here are the organizations. And so many people came up to me and said, oh, that's my story. Oh, let me tell you what I've been through. And it would just give me goosebumps in that moment because it would just give me just a little bit of an extra push. Okay, keep going. And this is the reason. You are the reason why I'm making this film. It's not for money. It's not for anything else other than an impact because like everyone on this panel has been saying, it's not like now is the moment. We've been past the moment, like Renee was saying. We are well past that moment. And the other thing that I think is really important that I've learned from reporters and experts and activists that in the Hollywood space, when we hear this is great, this is important, but we can't fund it because XYZ, that is a form of censorship. And we need to push back on that. And the way we do that is by putting our money, like Jeff said, going to the theaters. The box office dollars count. That's what the studios and the networks and the decision makers see. And sometimes that doesn't always make a difference. But we live in a media landscape where we can make some disruptive moves, whether it's on social media, whether it's streaming. There are so many different streaming platforms, not just Netflix and Apple TV+. There's so many others that support independent films. And so I think we can play a role by speaking up and showing Democratic leaders that here is how you talk about abortion. You want our votes? Well, these are the stories that we want to share, but we want to know that you've got our backs. And so all that to say, funding is very hard. And so anytime you know a filmmaker and, you know, people are doing a Kickstarter, even if it's $10, every dollar counts. And it means that these stories can get out there. And even if it's buying someone a coffee on the road when they're filming or hiring their equipment or giving them a reference for a rental house, all those little things make such a big deal. It helped me make my film. All my post-production music and sound was a friend reference. They gave me a huge discount. My animator, 12 minutes of animation is so expensive. Something I learned along the way, but my animator is based in Brazil. She works with a fabulous team. They really believed in the project and she gave me a discount, but I knew that raising the money, doing a Kickstarter meant I could make this film, elevated and make it better. So yeah, funding is always a huge struggle, but there are ways to, it's like a peer-to-peer thing, the crowdfunding model can change that. So yes, please support independent filmmakers.
I also just have to add, like, I'm always like really inspired when people are like, I care so much about this. I'm really like, I'm willing to give you a discount. Like, that's all really beautiful stuff. And fuck that. I want to pay you your full rate. I want to pay you what you're worth. Like, the fact that these stories have to be told because people are giving discounts all the time, it's such a, like, that's such a problem. And honestly, like the thing, well, look, okay, we can have a whole conversation about like late stage capitalism, which we won't do. I won't bring us there today. Yeah, that's later. But what I will say is that the amount that we fund these stories also tells everybody how much they're worth. What you're willing to do for your, it tells you how much you're worth. And that it has to change. It has to change. So how we do that, I mean, I don't know. I have ideas. We could talk after. If you have a lot of money and you want to talk about this, please come find me.
You touched on working with organizations, and Jess, I know you've worked with Plan C, and Ruth as well, and Renee, you run in one of these organizations, which is also, a nonprofit and also underfunded, probably doesn't have the staff that you need, and just like independent filmmaking. But how do you work with like storytellers like this to help them reach new audiences? And I guess also, like, how do we reach audiences beyond like folks in this room? What is the ones that really need to be seeing these stories?
Yeah. So I've been doing abortion storytelling work for about 15 years. And in that time, I had amassed a large Twitter following. And so people would come to me with their documentaries and would want me to share it on social media or whatever. They'd want my cosign. And same thing with books and things like that. And I'd watch them, and I would refuse to co-sign them or support them because they only included white abortion storytellers. They would only include an acceptable abortion storyteller. So either a white married woman with a very wanted pregnancy, or a teenager who just needs to finish school. And those stories deserve to be told. But that's not the majority of who has abortions in this country. And that is not who I am. And that is not the majority of who We Testify works with. And then with the books too, it'd be so funny because I'd be like, well, can you talk to me about how race is included in your book? Well, it's in chapter 10. Okay, well, fun fact, and you can read in my and Regina's book that comes out later this year, anti-Blackness is at the core of all of abortion restrictions. So the fact that race comes in at chapter 10 means your book is inaccurate. If it is not in your documentary, that means it isn't accurate. But what I got tired of was being asked after the fact for the impact campaign. And I know how much the impact campaign matters, but I am not willing to platform something that dehumanizes and erases my own experience. Why would I participate in my own erasure? Especially when you weren't even offering me any money to do it. Apparently my Twitter account is worth something. That's why you wanted on it. So no. And then I got to the point where I was like, but I actually want to work with you beforehand. I could help you make this better. I want to. I really do. I would love to be able to platform a great documentary like Someone You Know, or The Janes is another one that's fantastic, right? And that is kind of where we ended up with this whole abortion pipeline project. We were at lunch, and I'd just come from striking with the actors on the Hollywood. So we were in front of Netflix. And I will say I was really saddened to see how many people within the repro movement had said nothing about the strike, because you cannot have reproductive rights without labor rights. Because if you do not have the pay that you deserve, then you do not get to decide if, when, and how to grow your family. It's all connected. And we should not be afraid of the powers that be. So what? We have to have solidarity. And so we went to lunch. we were talking about this, and then we were talking about how we needed to partner more. And I feel like we're like over salads. And I was like, I just wish we could like get them to be better before the scripts get done and before the documentaries, right? And then she was like, I think we could. What if we? And so, we came back with this project, and I think that the challenge is that people look at our organizations as just part of the impact campaign and as communications or PR. You guys, like, not you guys, but like they look at us as a bit of free PR, like, oh, if we can get this one organization to help lift up our film. We're actually experts in the work that we do. And I personally think it is wrong if I platform something that has misinformation in it, and I won't do it. Others can, and that's fine. I will not. But also bring us in as thought partners, because we can help you strengthen your work. And I've run into some filmmakers who don't want to do that, because then they're like, well, I don't want to have an advocacy angle on it. Was one thing I was heard her. Well, I don't want to be influenced in that way. I am an expert on abortion because I have had one and because I have been studying it for 15 years. Ask anyone. I know probably the most about abortion in like our entire movement. I am an expert, just like the white dude talking head that you might have in your film, who you consider unbiased because he has not had an abortion. It happens. I watch those films all the time too. Talk to us as experts, right? A lot of us will do it for free because we actually want to see some. We shouldn't. But we get it. I understand, right? But like for so long, I was willing to, because I just want a good product out there. And so I think it is really critical that you think about who you can partner with. And I was there since day one of this film, like talking about it. We've had so many conversations, right? Talk to Asha. She can talk to you about what that looks like, because we have so many conversations and so much feedback. I have so many thoughts. There were many times I'm sure she was like, this bitch is yelling at me. But like, because I was like, no, here's how to get it right. This is what it looks like when you get it right.
Can I add one more thing? One of the things that I learned from Renee in that process was, I was explaining to her, we want to showcase some experts and doctors and abortion storytellers. And she said to me, the abortion storytellers are the experts. And that shifted my thinking. And so just little things like that I learned along the way, I think are really important. So thank you.
That's great, Asha. Thanks for sharing that. We are out of time, but I want to end with a question for each of you to answer in like 1 minute. Melissa, is that okay? So first, I just want you to tell people where they can follow you and just to learn more about you and when to buy your book, et cetera, et cetera. And then also just like in like a few words, what gives you hope for the future of abortion and in America, and also storytelling?
You can follow the film someoneyouKnowDoc.com if you want to talk about screenings or events. I'm always happy to talk to people and learn how I can partner with you and collaborate with you. So please get in touch. I think what gives me hope is people, community, and being in community with people like this, and people who are willing to show up and do the work and invest in whatever way they can. So that gives me hope. I'm not so interested in the leaders or the powers that be, because this is where it happens. It starts locally, and it starts with us connecting on a one-on-one, 20-on-1 basis and getting to know each other. So that gives me hope.
What gives me hope is every single one of you who raised your hand and said that you had an abortion. You didn't know I was going to ask that. You might not have been prepared to out yourselves today. That is huge. And the more and more that we have conversations, that's going to make the difference. I'm sure you all were surprised to see how many people raised their hand in the room, weren't you? I'm never that surprised, because we're never alone and we are here. The point is that we need to talk to each other, and when we're ready, share our stories and be open. You can follow We Testify on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. Our communications manager, Emma, is here, so you can swarm her with a bunch of questions. Isabel, one of our storytellers, is here. Hi. I don't know if we have any other storytellers right here. Hey, Sonaima's here. Oh, yes. And then Regina Mahone, my co-author and co-host of our podcast, The A Files, A Secret History of Abortion. It's from the Meteor. Our 8th and final episode just came out on Wednesday. So if you want to learn about the history in depth, 45 minutes at a time on any of this, you can listen wherever you get podcasts. And then our book, Liberating Abortion, our legacy stories and vision for how we save us, will be out from HarperCollins this fall.
I don't know why I sit next to Renee. I mean, I love her, but I'm like, how am I supposed to? Okay. What gives me hope? All of the above, and the fact that artists are showing up to tell these stories. The amount of creativity that artists bring to these conversations, that these partnerships between organizations, experts doing the work, and filmmakers, artists coming together, like these kinds of partnerships, it's made me a better artist. Renee and I were talking the other day about how, like, she's like, what's pre-lap? Like, when I'm reading the script, like, I didn't know what that, I had to look it up. She's like, I learned something. I'm like, we all benefit from these kinds of partnerships, and just like artists getting to be a part of the movement, that being normalized, those collaborations, it's joyful. It's so fun. And it gives me hella hope. You can follow me at Jess Jacobs X across all platforms. Plan C Movie is at Plan C Movie and plancmovie.com. Yeah, that's it.
What gives me hope are all of you here, because you're here, and that really makes a huge difference. And you're already here, so you're talking about it, and that's what we need to do. We have to keep talking about abortion. Our film is at nooneaskedyou.com. nooneaskedyou.com. Sorry. And I'm at Ruthless Films on social media. And I'm really excited about our screening today because we have 3 larger than life characters from the film who will be doing a Q&A. All of them are way funnier than I am. Way funnier. So I'm thrilled. Joelle Johnson, Jay McBride, and Nicole Moore will be with us today. And that's at 3:00 in this very room. So thrilled about that. And yeah.
Thank you. And what gives me hope is having these conversations and being able to say abortion and being able to say those things to our kids, Yes, all together now. Abortion, abortion, abortion,
Abortion!
Yay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that there are many people out here who want to speak with you now. Oh, yeah, we can do that.
I know.